Welcome back to another episode of the Downsizing Roadmap Podcast with your hosts, Jodi Roscoe and Heather Fisher. We're talking about all things downsizing, from our own experiences with clients to guest experts. Let's make downsizing easier, one conversation at a time.
Hi, welcome to Downsizing Roadmap Podcast. Today we're talking about our house, maybe if we've been there a long time, how that morphs into our identity, and we feel like, who are we if we make a move and aren't in that house? So
yeah, it kind of all weaves together, doesn't it?
It certainly does. So we're going to talk about why we feel that way, and certainly we all do to different levels, and maybe some ways to adjust that thinking.
Untangle.
Yeah, untangle is a great way to phrase that.
Yeah.
I'm Heather Fisher.
I'm Jodi Roscoe. And what that future can look like, because again, we always talk about, sometimes the way to get out of where you are is to know where you're going. And so I think it's very, very normal if you feel so settled in your house and you feel so, entwined in all of the memories of it and just all the comfortableness of knowing, where you've been for so long and, how long it takes to get to the grocery store and where, everything is from it's all so comfortable. Yeah. But sometimes it's not working for you anymore. And so you have to balance that comfort where it's really not comfortable anymore, but there's some inside level of, emotionally it's comfortable, but, physically might not be working.
Yeah, back to, our 5-step downsizing method. We start with number 1, dream it, because that's a forward facing. Yeah. It's not, just sitting in that same spot in your mind or, physically and not moving forward. It's really looking at what's next and how to have that be exciting and new, and not feel like you just have to stay anchored to that one physical space for things to be okay.
Yeah, because I think a lot of it is living in the past, to be honest. Memories of your kids there, or relationships, or times that you've spent, holidays, all of those things can be very, very strong pulls to the house, and your routines, everything that's in that goes along with that house. You go outside and you mow, whatever, once a week, and all of the things. And so it does hold a lot of who you've been, but is that who you want to be?
Yeah, when you've lived in a house for 20 or 30 years, your brain has literally wired your memories around those things that you see. And it's understandable that there's a little bit of anxiety to not have those reminders all around you. But it's always inside of you. It's never about the stuff or the place. You have those memories. If you can just take that step forward, that's all still with you.
Right. Those are all internal, not external. And I think the other thing is, once you've created routines and habits and all of that stuff, those don't take a lot of mental energy anymore. And so you're kind of running on that, right? Coasting. And when you decide to make a move, then there's a lot of mental energy going into what's my new routine going to look like, or where's my new, where will my stuff go in that new house? Where all of the things, where's the new house even going to be? Like, where am I going to go? And so much mental energy has to go in that. It does start to feel exhausting sometimes. And so you want to just lean back on that easy of, not because you've already created those routines years ago. Yeah. But the question is, are those routines serving you still? And is that who you still want to be?
Yeah, exactly. And knowing that the fastest way to the other side is through it. Yeah. So, once you know that that's the right choice to make that move and to get somewhere that for any number of reasons, location or safety or ease, that you're going somewhere else, to get through that path, then those routines become new again and become routine, and the exhaustion is because of all the decisions right at once.
Yeah, it's all the new. Mm-hmm. It's all the new.
Yeah.
That takes all the brain power. So why does identity get tied to your house? So, there's a lot of psychology in it, right? So your home becomes your framework around you for all the things that happen, your holidays, your childhood memories, your milestones, grief, growth, like whatever it is that's happening, you can look over in the corner and remember, somebody maybe that's not here anymore sitting there, at a holiday or whatever that looks like. Again, remember those memories are inside of you, not outside. But it does trigger some memories in the house. And I think that's something that is something to think about. And I will tell you guys, like, we lived in a house for 22 years, and my kids grew up there, brought them home. We got married and bought that house. And so when we left that house, it did feel like, oh my gosh, are we going to really miss it? And, all these memories, but I still have them, you guys. I still have all the memories. Yeah. I can still picture them in the kitchen, rolling out cookies for Christmas. I can picture all of that stuff. And so it won't go away if that's the fear. It won't go away.
Yeah. Yeah. Another reason people get tied to the house is that identity of the role they have in that house. So we see this often if you are the host and that was the hosting house or the garden, any kind of a role, even just managing a house that may be more than you need, that becomes your daily routine. Right. And there's a little bit of anxiety of, what will I fill that space with?
Right. Even if you're over it and you're done managing that house or gardening in that yard the way that you used to love it and now it's just too much. Maybe you're the memory keeper. Maybe you have all the bins of everything of everybody's, and you had the big house or the big basement or the big storage area, and so you ended up being the memory keeper. Now to move, you have to go through all of that stuff and figure out what to do with all those delayed decisions or guilt that somebody else gave you or all the things that you have. And so you're changing your role, right? You're changing your role of who you are. Maybe you're, the neighborhood king or queen. Maybe like you've lived there forever and you know everybody and you feel like, oh my gosh, that's going to be a social loss. Like maybe there will be a loss there that you feel like, I know everybody or whatever. I think a lot of times what happens is they end up moving away though too. Like I feel like, neighborhoods go through time turnover and stuff. So maybe that's who you were, but maybe that's not, even though you think so in your head, if you really think about it, it's not the same as it used to be. So, the question again is not that past. Like, I mean, you can identify what those are, but then what do you want your future roles to? This is all very mindset,
The way to look at that can bring you a little bit of ease is that all of those roles are wrapped up with different traits that you identify with, not necessarily the role. So maybe you're the connector, maybe you're the teacher, maybe you're the caregiver, maybe you're the organizer, maybe you're the friend, the mentor, the creator. All of those traits are why you have morphed into that role. And the traits come with you, right? Not they don't stay at the location. So I think if you look at it that way, and really look at why you're feeling anxiety about giving up that role, it's what part, what trait of yours flourishes most in that, and how can you find a way to use that same trait in your next spot, and, be the teacher there or the mentor or the host. It's not the physical location or exactly the same thing that you need to recreate. You just need to use that part of yourself that brought you so much joy.
Yeah, and how can you recreate some of that in the next place? If you're the entertainer, maybe you can still do that on a different level. Maybe there's a, big community room you could entertain the family in, or maybe somebody else's house, but you still bring, your favorite dishes or whatever that is. You can still, the traditions can change, because that's scary too. It feels scary when the traditions are different. And, we've had Christmas at our house for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, and now it's not going to happen. We have that. When my grandma and my mom, passed away, their house was the Christmas house. And so it's different, but it's okay. It's okay. Yeah. And so, what does that look like? We had a client who had the most amazing spirit, and she had some health issues. She ended up going into assisted living, and when she got there, she was still herself, and she went and she was the queen of the euchre. She was like, she started the whole euchre thing. She just went in going, I am going to do all the things, and she did. And so that didn't leave her, She left the house, but all of that was still there. And so she just created those wanting to entertain and all that stuff with the new people that she was around. And she came up with ideas and recreated it. And her spirit was amazing.
Yeah, it definitely was. And I think that's the most important part, is just to trigger into which emotion you're feeling like you're going to miss, and find it. It's everywhere, and there's so much fun and adventure ahead for whatever fits that need.
Well, and I think the key is it doesn't have to look exactly like it's always looked to still be there, right? You're, entertaining or gardening or whatever that is, being the connector, all of those things that you said, which I love that. Connector, friend, whatever that is, you can still be all those same things. It just looks different, but you can still fulfill all of that inside of you in a different way.
Yeah.
And maybe even more, to be honest, because I think sometimes people get stuck in their house and, maybe get a little more isolated, or maybe, just get a little bit overwhelmed with all the things, and maybe it'll free you to actually be more of who you are.
Yeah. Perhaps those things, they've already lost that role a bit, but they're hanging on to the location, hoping that, they haven't lost that role. And, just figuring out a way to move into that role in a different way is so joy-bringing and fulfilling, and really makes life a little easier.
Yeah. Okay, so what are people afraid of losing? So purpose. They're afraid to lose their purpose. The house has been, you've been responsible for it.
Yeah.
We've talked before about whether when you own something, you feel so much more responsibility for it, even if you've only owned it for 5 seconds. Remember that mug story, right?
Yep.
People got that mug, and as soon as they got it, it was theirs, and then they were really super responsible for it. So, you felt responsible, you felt productive, you felt, proud of your house, you felt all of those things. And so letting go can feel like, oh my gosh, maybe what am I going to do with myself now if I don't have to dust these 27 rooms? Okay, not 27, but if I don't have to dust, these rooms I don't use, if I don't have to, garden in all these beds that I made and thought were amazing and now I'm over it,
Yeah, and since none of us have a crystal ball, I think moving into any new situation, it's human nature to anticipate that all the worst things are going to happen. And so until you know that known of the new, you wrap that anxiety of, well, of course it's going to be worse.
Right. And because, the unknown can be scary. And that's why we say, do some due diligence, figure out, what kind of spaces you want to be in the future. Is that a smaller ranch home, just something on one level? Is it just a smaller house in general? Is it a condo? Is it, a community? Where do you think you want to go? Go look at some of them. If you need help with that, let us know. We can find you somebody that we can refer you to, a great agent that can help you with that. But knowledge is power, right? And so figuring out what you want that to look like on paper and what you want your identity to look like on paper, and just spending some time thinking about those things before you try to jump into really making a giant change will help you with that fear. Because once you know things, then the fear is so much less.
Yeah. Other things people fear losing, they fear of losing connection. That can just be worries about your distance from neighbors that you love, or, less convenience if you have family close by and you're moving somewhere further away, or losing being just that house that everyone comes to.
The Kool-Aid house.
Yeah, the Kool-Aid house. That when you have kids, we all know what that is. And
if you're as old as we are.
Yes, for sure. The big cans of the high C punch is what I remember. But neighbors' routines become part of your own routines. I think I was thinking about this, and I was in a vibrant neighborhood for 20 years where I raised my kids. And, in thinking about this episode, I didn't necessarily interact with all of my neighbors all the time, but you become so accustomed to their routines too that you feel it's kind of like social media. You see people's names and their posts, you feel more connected to acquaintances
than you really
are. So, you see the same kids walking to the bus stop and you feel connected to that routine at the same time every day. Or, Susie next door checks the mail when she gets home and walks down the driveway. And you start to just have a whole sense of what's going on in the neighborhood. But rest assured, you'll establish those routines with the people around you
in the next place.
Yeah. And it may be more convenient to take that from just a surrounding routine to actual connection.
Yeah.
And finding ways to do that.
Yeah, depending on where you land. You might have a condo that has a clubhouse where everybody gets together and does things or whatever that looks like. You might actually have more opportunity for connection, and you will have more time that you aren't spending working on the house. And so in that time, even if it's not your neighbors, you can go join groups of things that you're interested in. If connection is something that is really important to you, and you can find people like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So fear of losing history or legacy, that is back to something we've talked about so many times, but that pressure of ownership and keeping items just as proof of a life well lived, your own or someone else's, and just getting over that hump of the life was still well lived without every item.
Well, every item, it doesn't relate to your identity. And so that's another thought process. Again, there's a lot of thinking that should go into this before you start, and I think that's where everybody skips those steps and then kind of feels a little bit adrift. But that what you want your legacy to be, what things that you want to remember, what things that you want to continue on with, maybe hobbies or whatever, and what ones you can let go of now. And so those things are, when you really get down to all the thousands of things that are in your house, not all of them are your identity, even though when you're starting it feels like it as a whole, like the whole house is me. Yeah. And but when you really look at it, it isn't.
I think that way back to one of our very early episodes when we did the book review of Keep the Memories, Lose the Stuff. Mm-hmm. Is that Josh Becker? I think is the author. I'm sorry if I have that wrong. But back in that book, he was talking specifically about making an actual legacy box. And it's a great starting point before you start looking at each item one by one as you pick them up. Like, is this part of my legacy? Is this? That's such decision fatigue. But if you just sit with yourself for a few minutes and think about, if I was packing that box, what things would I go gather? And you're going and selecting and, mentally, whether you're actually putting them in a physical box, you're defining those categories, and that gives parameters as you pick up items one by one. You've already established what the parameters of that legacy are, and you can make the decision easier.
And you don't need to keep every single thing that relates to that legacy either. So once you've decided, on 4 or 5 things that you feel like are your legacy, then you keep 1 or 2 things for each of those things. You don't have to keep every single thing that goes with that. And if you aren't sure, ask your family what they remember you for. What is that for you? So like for my Nana, she loved to read. She loved reading. So, that's one of the things. We had happy hour at 5:00 every day. That was also one of her things. She drank the same drink every day. It was an old fashioned, so there are certain things about her that are her legacy, but we didn't need to keep like every glass she owned, it's just certain things that you remember, or every book that she owned. But if you aren't sure what your legacy is or what your family remembers you for, my grandma was food. She loved cooking, and so that was her. And so ask them. Because they will tell you. There's definitely things that really stand out to them about you.
Well, and honestly, full circle, when, some of us are frustrated later thinking nobody wants any of my stuff, when you've asked that question and, they've helped you curate that legacy, that is the stuff that they will want to keep.
Right.
And they won't be burdened with that whole, just overwhelm of everything and trying to figure it out in a time when they might be grieving or, dealing with a time crunch. You've really done that together.
Yeah. My mom loved antiques and she loved history and things like that. And so, that's not my vibe of my house, but I did keep some certain things that are old and that really remind me of her and that I love. Yeah. And so that part of her legacy lives on through those few things. It doesn't have to be a lot of things.
Yeah, my dad collected the miniature cast iron skillets and hundreds of them, which I do not want hundreds of them, but I want a few because that was so much a part of what he loved to go hunt at the antique stores for and collect. So that makes it a legacy and a memento of someone's life versus just a burden of too much.
Well, because when you've shared the story together and talked about how that's the legacy together and shared those stories, it makes the thing so much more meaningful. Yeah. Because it's about the stories, it's not about the stuff.
Yeah. Well, and I have such a memory of, years ago, my dad wanted, all the skillets. When I was growing up, they were on the wall and stuff, but they were down in the basement, and he wanted to help my siblings and I and the grandkids choose a couple that they wanted to take. And I can only imagine it was such a great day for my dad because he went in like birth order, and then you got time with just him. They were all laid out, and he would tell you the stories and tell you what he liked, and you got to choose a couple with him and hear those stories. And that's something we'll all treasure, and I think all of us that have a few love that because of that moment.
I love that. So identity, when you are downsizing and ending up with less, actually becomes more clear instead of less clear, because if you have less things, then each of those things means a little bit more. Mm-hmm. And so the more you have, the more murky it makes everything, and the less that you actually can see what your identity or your legacy is, or what you actually want to be spending some time doing. So your identity will become more clear without that clutter. And you'll probably realize that you really, weren't attached to the stuff. You're really attached to the stuff, the stories. And you weren't really attached to the house. You were attached to the memories and who you were inside of there and what people you shared it with and all of that stuff. It's not the house itself. It's just, again, it's the stories that happened inside the house.
Yeah.
And, you think all of the stories, they're inside of you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that when you free that space because you've thought about things ahead of time, it makes it so much easier to move to that next space and to choose the next space that will work for the identity you want to be, instead of, oh, does this have enough closet space to shove all those boxes I haven't let go of? Mm-hmm. You're really choosing life and joy and what freedom of time and freedom of choice, instead of choosing essentially your next storage unit.
Yeah, and being surrounded by things that are heavy and making you feel weighed down by it.
Yeah.
And something else that happens that I think is really interesting, I was going through some stuff and I was with my daughter and I was telling her the stories of the stuff, and then I'm like, and then that goes to donate. And then I did that like 4 or 5 times, and she's like, you're cracking me up, Mom. Like, you're telling me all the stories about this stuff, and then you're like, but I don't want it. And I think what happens is you realize that I do know the story about it, but that story is not that important to me. Yeah. Like, it's not part of my legacy. So yes, I know the story and I know where it came from and I know whatever, but it's not so important to me that I need to keep that thing. And sometimes just telling that story releases it for you, because you're just like, yeah, that's what happened. And the neighbor had that and she, get whatever. And it's just not something that's important enough for you to keep. And so it makes it easier to release it once you've told the story.
Yeah, sometimes you have to say that story out loud or to yourself to actually realize whether you have a story or you're just kind of digging your feet.
Yeah. So I bought that at Target, and like whatever. It's not really, I mean, it's a story, but it's not something that's like, oh my gosh, I need to keep that forever story. So.
Yeah. Okay, so if we make that move, now it's time to kind of redefine ourselves with the confidence of that next space and knowing that we're going to flourish in that next chapter.
Yeah, we've released all of the taking, energy that freed up a bunch of time and, all of that stuff. So what are we going to redefine ourselves in now that we've been able to do that?
Yeah, so some questions that you can ask yourself as you're trying to figure out this new space is, how do I want my days to feel? Where do I want my energy to go? What relationships do I want to nurture? What burdens am I ready to lay down? And then start looking, at those identity anchors that do come with you. What routines do you want to, tweak, but maybe keep somewhat the same? What values, what relationships, what sentimental but curated objects that you've brought with you, and any skills or interests that you want to continue, maybe in a different way, but still continue as part of your identity.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to try new things. Like, if there's something that your routines were your routines and they worked for you, and some of them will still work for you, and some of them you might have outgrown, and maybe it's time for some different routines. And same with things that you're doing with your time. Now you're going to have some more time. So if my husband's dad was an engineer, very, very, math engineer. And when he retired, he started to paint, and he painted lots. He ended up going to, the community center and taking classes, which he loved because he was with other people who were painting. And it was like the totally other side of his brain that he had not used in his whole career. And he painted us Christmas cards. So we have probably 12 or more Christmas cards. And last year I framed them all for Mark. And so we put out all of his Christmas cards that he had hand painted. But that was a totally new thing for him.
Yeah.
And something that he had always wanted to do and just never had done. So don't be afraid to step out of your routines and try something different. And he got so much joy from that whole different outlet that he had never had in his life.
Yeah, and we're in a lot of the senior centers in our community, and there's so much going on.
Yeah.
So whatever is kind of, nudging in your brain of, I wonder about this. There's a club, there's a activity, there's a class that you can join for sure.
And I think always learning new things keeps you young.
Yeah.
And so, maybe it's an instrument you want to learn to play, or, whatever, some, woodworking, or I don't even know, but think of things, book club, volunteering, whatever it is, different things.
Yeah, I was at an event just on Friday with some of our friends at the senior center, and they were talking amongst themselves, two of them, about, didn't I see you at the learning to speak French class?
I love it.
And the one responded yes, and they were talking about that. And yes, and just talking about that, and she invited the one was a little more nervous or hesitant to try it, and she was like, no, you should come. And I mean, it was so fun, and
none of it's serious, right? You don't have to take any of it seriously. It's not going to, affect like your future job, whatever, anything. Now it's just all fun. So if there's something you've been wanting to do, go do it. Just enjoy it, and you will meet people who also want to do that. Oh, the one that I was talking about that had that amazing spirit loved dancing, and she took she took like ballroom dancing, and she was amazing. So anything, like just open your mind up a little bit about like, hey, I've always thought about this thing. Do it. Just go do it.
So as you start getting settled into that new place, research on relocation stress shows that emotional dip of, feeling a little anxious about it is going to show up 2 to 6 weeks after the move. So that's normal. That's, you're on the adrenaline high of all the decisions and the moving and the unpacking, and then you're going to feel that dip. But that stabilization happens about 60 to 90 days. So if you're feeling that, if you feel unsettled at week 3, you did not make the wrong choice. It's just time to double down on those new routines, those new connections, that new feeling of this is my place, it's coming. So if you've just gone through this and you're feeling that, stay tuned, because it just takes a little bit of that curve of, okay, we did it, and then you feel unsettled for a few weeks, and then it's coming around that 60 to 90 day mark.
And ask yourself, what are you feeling unsettled about? Is it you're not sure, how to get to wherever? Go out and drive it. Just go out and go figure that out. Like, if it's you're feeling like socially you're a little bit more isolated, go join something. Like, just taking action makes all the difference.
Yeah, as simple as taking a walk and smiling at someone new, and taking it from there.
Yeah. Yep. So build connection, find your neighbors, find groups, do kind of do that kind of stuff. So, here's a little, grab a piece of paper, and a pencil or pen, and, ask yourself these questions. It's just kind of a little reflective thought process. So, what part of me am I most afraid will disappear in this move? What part of myself do I want to bring forward more fully? If my home didn't define me at all, what would I do?
Yeah.
What do I want this next chapter? What do I want to be known for? Or what do I want the next chapter to look like? Maybe it's travel. Maybe it's, being with your family more. What is it? What does you want it to look like? What role have I outgrown? I love this one, because I think we do get stuck sometimes in our roles that we think
we hang on too long.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And they have actually gone, and we're still identifying with it, and it's not even, there anymore. What role excites me now? I love this one too. Like, future facing, like what is it we're going to do next? If my house weren't part of the equation, how would I describe myself? So answer some of those questions. This is all about your mindset and thinking about what your future is going to look like, and thinking about who you are, who you've been, who it's okay to let go of who you've been. Maybe there's a few things that you take with you to remind you of that. Not many. Yeah. And then really the exciting future that's waiting for you.
Yeah, your identity is not the house that you live in. It's your values, your relationships, your resilience, your generosity, all of those things wrapped up in you.
Yeah.
And those go with you.
Yeah, and you're always going to be you.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yep.
So hopefully this was helpful to just think about that mindset. If you need any resources, our website, downsizingroadmap.com. And if you'd like our free downsizing guide, which has a few sections starting to explore the mindset on downsizing, our Dream It section, you can get that also on our website, downsizingroadmap.com/guide. Just request it there, and we'll talk to you again next week.
Talk to you soon.
Thanks for joining us on the Downsizing Roadmap Podcast. If you found this episode helpful, be sure to subscribe, leave us a review, and share it with someone who might need a little downsizing inspiration. Have questions or ideas for future episodes? Reach out to us on our website, www.downsizingroadmap.com. Until next time, let's keep simplifying and moving forward.